Everyone thinks the bride holds all the power on her wedding day. But Merrit learned the hard way that when you uninvite the woman who secretly owns the building, there is no wedding. The humidity in Savannah, Georgia, hangs heavy enough to wear like a coat. But the chill inside the LeClaire restaurant was far worse. At 72, Meredith Peter was used to being underestimated. It was a skill she had cultivated for decades, much like her garden of prize-winning lilies. Tonight, however, her patience was being tested not by the heat, but by the woman sitting at the head of the table. Meredith adjusted her glasses, the ones with the slightly taped hinge, and looked down at her place setting. While the other guests, her son's friends, mostly young influencers and tech entrepreneurs, had crystal goblets and linen napkins, Meredith's spot was different. She had been seated at the very end of the long table, right next to the swinging kitchen doors. Every time a waiter rushed out with a tray of steaming crab cakes, the door bumped the back of her chair. "Oh, don't mind the draft, Meredith," Merrit said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. She raised her wine glass, catching the light so her diamond engagement ring sparkled aggressively. "We just couldn't fit everyone in the main section. And since your hearing isn't what it used to be, I thought the quiet corner would be better for you." Meredith didn't respond immediately. She simply smoothed the fabric of her thrifted beige cardigan. It was wool, slightly pilled at the elbows, and it smelled faintly of lavender and old books. To Merrit, this cardigan was a crime against fashion. To Meredith, it was camouflage. "My hearing is fine, Merrit," Meredith said calmly, picking up her water glass. "And I believe this is the service entrance, not the quiet corner." Hollis, Meredith's son, kept his eyes glued to his phone. He was a handsome man, 30 years old, with the strong jawline of his late father, but he lacked the backbone to match it. He tapped away at a screen, desperate to avoid the tension crackling between the two women in his life. "Hollis, put the phone away," Merrit commanded, her tone shifting from sweet to sharp as a knife. "We are celebrating our future. Or does your mother's complaining take precedence over our engagement dinner?" Hollis flinched, quickly sliding the phone into his pocket. "Sorry, babe. Mom, just try to enjoy the food. It's really expensive." Meredith took a small sip of water. Expensive. She looked around the restaurant. She knew the cost of the imported Italian marble on the bar. She knew the hourly wage of the sous chef in the back. She knew exactly how much debt the restaurant owner was in, because her holding company, the Peter Heritage Group, held the note on the building. If she wanted to, she could snap her fingers and turn this trendy bistro into a parking lot by Tuesday. But she didn't. Power, real power, didn't need to shout. It only needed to wait. "I'm not complaining, Hollis," Meredith said quietly but powerfully. "I am simply observing." "Well, observe quietly, please," Merrit laughed, looking around at her friends for validation. "We have big news. As you all know, the wedding is in 3 days. And because someone," she pointed a perfectly manicured nail at herself, "has pulled some major strings, we have secured the Gilded Magnolia as our venue." The table gasped. The Gilded Magnolia was not just a venue. It was a Savannah legend. A historic estate on the river, gated, private, and usually booked 5 years in advance. It was the kind of place where senators and movie stars got married. "No way!" one of the bridesmaids squealed. "That place costs a fortune, and the waiting list is impossible." Merrit tossed her hair, a curtain of blonde extensions. "Let's just say I have influence. The owner saw my Instagram following and realized it would be good exposure for them. They bumped a senator's daughter just to fit us in." Meredith choked slightly on her water. The audacity was breathtaking. The owner hadn't bumped anyone. The owner had simply cleared the schedule because the groom was her son. But Meredith had done it anonymously, through her lawyer, Orion. As far as Merrit knew, she was getting the deal of the century because she was famous on the internet. "Are you okay, Meredith?" Merrit asked, her voice cold. "Is the water too complicated for you?" "I'm fine," Meredith said, wiping her mouth with a paper napkin the waiter had dropped. "The Gilded Magnolia is a beautiful estate. I hope you treat it with respect." Merrit rolled her eyes. "It's just a house, Meredith. Old and dusty, kind of like, well, never mind." She picked up the bottle of expensive Cabernet to refill her glass, but as she reached across the table, her hand slipped. The dark red wine cascaded over the edge of the glass and splashed directly onto Meredith's lap. The crimson stain spread instantly across her beige skirt and the beloved cardigan. The table went silent. Hollis gasped. "Merrit! Oh my God!" Merrit cried, covering her mouth with a hand that didn't look shaky at all. "I am so clumsy. I am so sorry, Meredith." She grabbed a napkin and dabbed aggressively at Meredith's chest, pushing her back into the chair. "Although," Merrit whispered, leaning in close so only Meredith could hear, "at least now that outfit has some color. You look like part of the drywall." Meredith caught Merritt's wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong for a 72-year-old librarian. She held it for a second, looking deep into Merritt's eyes. She saw no remorse there, only the gleam of a predator playing with its food. "Accidents happen," Meredith said without emotion, releasing Merritt's wrist. "I will go clean up." She stood up, the red stain looking like a wound on her clothes. She walked past the kitchen doors, head held high. She didn't go to the bathroom. She walked out the front door, into the humid night, and got into her 20-year-old sedan. As she turned the key, she touched the small lump under her shirt, the heavy emerald pendant she wore beneath her layers. It was the Peter family emerald, worth more than this entire block. 3 days, she whispered to the rearview mirror. "You have 3 days to show me who you really are, Hollis." The next morning, the sun was blinding. Meredith drove to the Gilded Magnolia. She wasn't there to inspect the grounds as the owner. She was there because Hollis had begged her to come help with the flowers. When she arrived, the estate was buzzing with activity. Delivery trucks were unloading crates of champagne. Florists were carrying massive bundles of imported roses. Standing in the center of the chaos, wearing oversized sunglasses and shouting at a man in a tuxedo, was Merrit. The man was Mr. Sterling, the estate manager. He was a dignified man who had worked for the Peter family for 30 years. He looked like he was about to explode. "I asked for beige roses!" Merrit screamed, pointing at a bucket of white ones. "Beige! Like sand. These are white. Do I look like I want a basic white wedding?" "Madam," Mr. Sterling said, his jaw tight. The beige roses were not available from the supplier on such short notice. "These are English garden roses. They are triple the price, and—" "I don't care about the price," Merrit interrupted. "I'm not paying for them, am I? That's what the deposit is for. Fix it. Paint them if you have to." Meredith walked up the gravel path, her sneakers crunching softly. "Good morning," she said. Mr. Sterling's eyes widened. He straightened his back and opened his mouth to say, "Good morning, Mrs. Peter." But Meredith caught his eye and gave a nearly imperceptible shake of her head. Mr. Sterling coughed. "Good morning, ma'am." Merrit spun around. "Oh, you're here. Finally. Look, Meredith, since you're not doing anything important, grab a broom. The wind blew leaves onto the patio, and it looks messy." Hollis was standing nearby, looking at a clipboard. He looked tired. "Merrit, Mom isn't here to clean. She's here to help with decisions. She can decide to clean," Merrit said with a laugh, winking at her bridesmaids who were lounging on the antique garden furniture. "Besides, She's used to it, right? Didn't you say she lives in that little shed behind the library? It's a carriage house, Meredith corrected calmly. And I am happy to help. She took the broom from a stunned staff member. Mr. Sterling looked horrified. He stepped forward. Please, let the staff handle that. Guests should not be working. She's not a guest yet, Merrit snapped. She's family. Family pitches in. Right, Meredith. Meredith began to sweep. She watched as Merrit walked over to the historic fountain in the center of the courtyard, a fountain Meredith's grandfather had built. Merrit sat on the edge, posing for a selfie, with her phone high in the air. Living my best life at my private estate, Merrit said to her phone, recording a video story. So blessed to have all this. Meredith swept a pile of oak leaves into a pan. She wasn't angry about the broom. She was angry about the lies. She walked over to Hollis, who was hiding in the shade of the porch. Hollis, she said softly, I have something for you. She reached into her pocket and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a check for $5,000. It wasn't much compared to her millions, but it was a test. She wanted to see if they valued the gesture. Hollis took the envelope. He opened it and smiled. A genuine, relieved smile. Mom, thanks. This really helps. The deposit for the DJ was due today and I was short. Before he could put it in his pocket, Merrit appeared. It was as if she could smell money. She snatched the envelope from Hollis's hand. What's this? She asked, pulling out the check. She looked at the number, her face twisted in disgust. 5,000? Meredith, seriously, it's what I could gather from my savings. Meredith lied smoothly. 5,000 won't even cover the champagne tower, Merrit scoffed. This is embarrassing. If you're going to contribute, at least make it worth my time to walk to the bank. With a sharp ribe, Merrit tore the check in half. Then, in quarters, she let the blue confetti pieces flutter down onto the patio Meredith had just swept. Merrit! Hollis shouted, actually raising his voice for the first time. That was a gift. It was an insult, Hollis, Merrit hissed, stepping into his personal space. We are building an empire. We don't need charity from a librarian. We need real investors. Now, pick that up. I have a photo shoot in 10 minutes. Merrit turned on her heel and marched away. Hollis stood there, looking at the pieces of the check on the ground. He looked at his mother. His eyes were watering. Mom! Don't, Meredith said firmly. Don't apologize for her. Pick it up, Hollis. Or leave it. The choice is yours. Hollis hesitated. He looked at his angry fiancée storming away, and he looked at his mother standing with a broom. Slowly, painfully, he knelt down and began picking up the paper scraps. He didn't look Meredith in the eye. He chose the peace of submission over the pain of resistance. Meredith felt a crack in her heart. Her son was gone. He was a hostage in his own life. The final blow came 2 days later. The day before the wedding, Meredith was in her small kitchen in the carriage house, boiling water for tea. The house was modest, filled with books, old rugs, and comfortable chairs. It was the only life Hollis knew she had. He didn't know about the penthouse in New York or the ranch in Montana. There was a sharp knock at the door. Not the rhythmic knock of a friend, but the demanding rap of a debt collector. Meredith opened it to find Merrit standing there. She wasn't alone. She had her assistant, a terrified teenager holding a garment bag waiting by the car. Merrit was wearing oversized sunglasses, even though it was overcast. Can I come in? Merrit asked, stepping past Meredith before she could answer. She looked around the small living room and wrinkled her nose. God, it smells like mothballs and depression in here. What do you want, Merrit? Meredith asked, leaving the door open. The wedding is tomorrow. Shouldn't you be resting? Merrit turned, taking off her sunglasses. We need to talk about optics, Meredith. Optics? The look, the vibe, the brand, Merrit said, using her hands to frame the air. Tomorrow is going to be huge. A magazine is covering it. Southern Style Weekly. It's my big break. That's nice, Meredith said calmly. I'm happy for you. Here's the thing, Merrit sighed, acting as if she were burdened with a great tragedy. I've been looking at the seating chart, and frankly, you don't fit. Meredith went very still. I don't fit? Look at you, Merrit said, gesturing vaguely at Meredith's simple cotton dress. You're quaint, but you're not high society. And Hollis? Bless his heart. He's worried you'll say something embarrassing or wear one of those awful sweaters. It's just too much stress for us. Merrit took a step closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. So I've decided. On your son's wedding day, it's better if you're not there. The words hung in the air, heavy and toxic. You are uninviting the groom's mother? Meredith asked quietly. Hollis agrees with me, Merrit lied, a small smirk playing on her lips. He's just too nice to say it to your face. We'll tell everyone you're ill. A sudden flu. It's cleaner that way. No drama. Just perfection. Merrit reached into her purse and pulled out a coupon for a local spa. She tossed it onto the dusty coffee table. Here, go get a massage tomorrow. Treat yourself. Just stay away from the venue. Meredith looked at the coupon. Then she looked at the woman who thought she held all the cards. For the first time in years, Meredith let the mask slip. Her posture straightened. The frailty vanished. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. You are making a mistake, Merrit, Meredith said, her voice sounding like gravel grinding together. The only mistake was thinking you could run with the elites. Merrit laughed, turning toward the door. Don't show up. Meredith, security has your photo. It would be humiliating for you to be dragged out. Meredith walked to the door and held it open. As Merrit stepped onto the porch, Meredith spoke one last time. If I am not there, Merrit, there is no wedding. Merrit paused. She looked back over her shoulder and laughed a harsh, barking sound. You're delusional, old woman. The wedding is paid for. The venue is booked. You are nothing but a guest, and guests can be removed. Merrit walked to her car, got in, and drove away, leaving a cloud of dust settling on Meredith's hydrangeas. Meredith stood on the porch for a long time. She watched the dust settle. Then she turned, walked back inside, and locked the door. She didn't go to the kitchen to finish her tea. She walked to the bookshelf, pulled out a thick volume of Shakespeare, and pressed a hidden button behind the binding. The bookshelf clicked and swung open, revealing a wall safe. Meredith spun the dial. Left, right, left. The heavy steel door creaked open. Inside lay stacks of legal documents, deeds, and a black phone that only had one number saved in it. She picked up the phone. Orion, she said when the line connected. Initiate the protocol. She just canceled her own wedding. She just doesn't know it yet. The silence from the carriage house was louder than any scream. For the 10th time that morning, Hollis pressed the call button on his phone, waited for the rings to cycle through, and listened to his mother's voicemail. Hi, this is Meredith. Leave a message. Her voice sounded normal, cheerful even, which made the current silence feel heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. She's not picking up, Hollis said, pacing the floor of their modern, sterile apartment. I should go over there. Maybe she fell. Merrit was sitting on the white leather sofa, scrolling through comments on her latest post about wedding prep stress. She didn't look up. Hollis, stop being dramatic. She didn't fall. She's sulking. It's a classic manipulation tactic. She wants you to chase her so she feels important. She's 72, Merrit. She doesn't play games like that, Hollis said, grabbing his keys. "Put the keys down," Merrit said, her voice dropping to a tone that was sharp as a knife. "If you go over there, you are rewarding bad behavior. She was disrespectful to me, and now she's giving us the silent treatment. Do you really want to bring that energy into our wedding tomorrow? Let her cool off. She'll show up at the church when she realizes we aren't begging." Hollis stood by the door, his hand hovering over the handle. He looked at the keys, then at Merrit. The fear of an argument, the exhaustion of constantly mediating between the two women, weighed him down. Slowly, he let his hand drop. He didn't go check on his mother. He sat back down. Across town, in the climate-controlled silence of a high-rise office building, Meredith was far from sulking. She was sitting in a leather chair that cost more than her car, staring at a large monitor. The room smelled of expensive coffee and old paper. Opposite her sat Orion, the Peter family lawyer. He was a man of few words and sharp suits. He tapped a key on his laptop, and a new document appeared on the screen. "It's worse than we thought, Mrs. Peter," Orion said quietly. "I ran the background check you requested. The Merrit Vance your son is marrying technically doesn't exist." Meredith adjusted her glasses, her face remaining like a statue. "Explain." "The woman in your son's apartment is named Sarah Miller. She legally changed her name to Merrit Vance 3 years ago in Nevada," Orion said, sliding a file across the mahogany desk. "But before the name change, she had 3 evictions and a bankruptcy. And that wealthy family she talks about? Her father is a mechanic in Ohio who hasn't spoken to her in a decade." Meredith opened the file. She saw mugshots, not for violent crimes, but for check fraud and shoplifting. She felt a cold pit form in her stomach. It wasn't anger. It was grief. Her son wasn't just marrying a rude woman. He was marrying a predator. "And the wedding money?" Meredith asked, her voice calm but tight. "Hollis gave her $40,000 from his savings for the vendors." "Where is it?" Orion clicked another window open. It showed a bank statement. The money was transferred 3 weeks ago, but not to the caterer and not to the florist. It went to the Sapphire Casino in Atlantic City. She gambled it all, Mrs. Peter, and she lost. Meredith closed her eyes. The humiliation her son was about to face was catastrophic. Merrit was planning to walk down the aisle, sign the marriage license to get access to Hollis's future inheritance, and leave the vendors unpaid. She was going to bankrupt him on day 1. "She plans to use the marriage certificate as leverage," Meredith said, thinking aloud. "Once they are legally wed, half of his debt becomes hers, but half of his assets become hers. She's looking for a bailout." "We can stop it," Orion said firmly. "We can show this to Hollis right now." "No," Meredith said, opening her eyes. "If we show him now, she will spin it. She will cry. She will say it was a mistake. She will blame a gambling addiction and beg for forgiveness. Hollis is too soft. He will forgive her to save face. He needs to see her true nature when she thinks no one is watching. He needs to see her without the mask." Meredith stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the city she helped build. "Initiate the freeze, Orion. Lock the venue accounts. And make sure the staff at the Gilded Magnolia knows exactly who signs their paychecks. The owner has some specific requests for the decor." The sun began to set over Savannah, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns of the Gilded Magnolia. Merrit arrived at the venue for the final walkthrough, her heels clicking aggressively on the stone path. She was on her phone, screaming at a bank representative. "What do you mean, insufficient funds? Check again. It's a transfer delay." She hung up violently as she saw the head of catering, a stout woman named Elena, arranging glasses on a tray. "You!" Merrit barked. "I told you I wanted the champagne tower by the fountain, not by the entrance. Move it." Elena didn't flinch. She didn't even look up. She continued polishing a glass with a linen cloth. "The fountain area is closed for maintenance, Miss Vance. The tower stays here, closed." Merrit gasped. "I didn't authorize any maintenance. I am the bride. The owner authorized it," Elena said, her tone flat. Merrit stomped her foot. "I am sick of hearing about this invisible owner. Where are the roses? I want to see the beige roses." She stormed into the main hall and froze. The room was breathtaking, but it was wrong. Everywhere she looked, the vases were filled not with the trendy, pale beige roses she had demanded, but with deep, blood-red lilies. Hundreds of them. The scent was overpowering, earthy, and regal. "What is this?" Merrit whispered, her voice trembling with rage. These are funeral flowers. They look like old lady flowers." Mr. Sterling appeared from the shadows, his hands clasped behind his back. "They are crimson lilies, Miss Vance, rare and quite expensive. The beige roses, wilted. The owner insisted on a replacement from their private garden." "I hate them!" Merrit shrieked, grabbing a vase and shoving it. It wobbled, but didn't fall. "Get them out! Call the florist! Fix this." "The florists have gone home, mister," Sterling said, checking his watch. "And the accounts are currently flagged. We cannot order new stock until the outstanding balance of $40,000 is cleared." Merrit went pale. She knew the balance wasn't cleared. She knew exactly where that money had gone into a slot machine that promised a jackpot but delivered nothing. She forced a smile. A terrifying rictus of fake sweetness. "Right. The bank error. I'm handling that," she said, her voice tight. "Just dim the lights. If it's dark enough, maybe no one will notice the flowers are hideous." She turned to leave, her heart hammering against her ribs. She felt like the walls of the estate were closing in on her, watching her. As she walked to her car, she could have sworn she saw a silhouette in the upper window of the main house, a figure watching her. Still, as a statue, she blinked, and it was gone. The rehearsal dinner that night was held at a trendy rooftop bar, not the Gilded Magnolia. The air was thick with humidity and expensive perfume. Hollis was circulating, shaking hands. But his eyes were hollow. He kept checking the door, hoping to see his mother's old sedan pull up. "Where is Meredith?" a cousin asked, holding a cocktail. "I haven't seen her all week." Hollis opened his mouth to say he didn't know, but Merrit swooped in, linking her arm through his. She was wearing a white cocktail dress that cost more than Meredith's car. "Oh, it's such a sad situation," Merrit said, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "Meredith has been confused lately. Very confused. We didn't want to worry anyone, but we had to put her in a specialized facility a few days ago, for her own safety." The cousin gasped. "A facility? But I saw her at the library last week. She seemed fine." "That's how it happens," Merrit said, shaking her head sadly. "It comes on fast. She started forgetting who I was. She became aggressive. It was heartbreaking, wasn't it, Hollis?" She squeezed Hollis's arm hard. "A pinch. A warning." Hollis looked at the cousin, then at Merrit. The lie was so big, so monstrous, that it choked him. But the wedding was in less than 24 hours. The deposits were paid, he thought. The guests were here. If he spoke up now, he would humiliate everyone. "She's resting," Hollis managed to say, his voice cracking. "It's better if she's not here." Merrit beamed at him, a predator satisfied with its prey's submission. "Exactly. Let's not let it ruin the vibe. Another round of drinks." As the group laughed and moved toward the bar, a man in a dark gray suit walked out of the elevator. He didn't look like a wedding guest. He moved with the precision of a shark. It was Orion. He walked straight up to Hollis. He didn't look at Merrit. Mr. Peter, Orion said, his voice deep and professional. Who are you? Merrit snapped, stepping in front of Hollis. We aren't buying anything. Orion ignored her completely. He held out a small, cream-colored envelope. A message. For your eyes only, sir. Hollis took it, his hands shaking. Is it from my mom? Is she okay? Read it before you sign the certificate tomorrow, Orion said. Good evening. He turned and walked away before Merrit could say a word. Give me that, Merrit demanded, snatching at the envelope. No, Hollis said. He pulled it back, a spark of defiance flaring in his chest. No, Merrit. It's addressed to me. He walked away from her, toward the bathroom, locking the door behind him. He tore open the envelope. Inside was a single index card with handwriting he didn't recognize, sharp, angular, legal script. The flowers at the wedding are not a mistake. They are a signal. Ask your fiancé where the $40,000 went. Ask her before you say, I do. A friend. Hollis stared at the card. The $40,000. He had transferred it to her account a month ago. She told him she had paid everyone. A cold dread seeped into his bones. He put the card in his pocket, splashed water on his face, and looked at himself in the mirror. He looked like a ghost. The morning of the wedding dawned with a sky the color of a bruise. Thunder rumbled in the distance, threatening a storm that perfectly matched the mood at the Gilded Magnolia. Merrit was in the bridal suite, a stunning room with antique mirrors and silk drapes. She should have been happy. She was hours away from securing her future. But she was in a panic. Her phone was buzzing incessantly. Texts from the photographer. Payment still pending. I don't shoot until it clears. Texts from the DJ. Money not received. I'm packing up. It's a glitch. She screamed at her phone, throwing it onto the velvet sofa. Stupid banks! She looked at herself in the mirror. The dress was perfect, a mermaid cut with imported lace. She looked like a princess. She took a deep breath. She just had to get through the ceremony. Once she was Mrs. Hollis Peter. She would have access to his trust fund. She could write checks to everyone then. She just needed to stall. She opened the door and grabbed her maid of honor. Tell everyone to get ready. We are starting 10 minutes early. But the groom's mother isn't here, the maid of honor said. Should we wait? She's not coming, Merrit said, her voice sharp as glass. And if an old woman in a beige cardigan tries to get in, tell security to remove her. I don't care if she cries. I don't care if she screams. She does not ruin my moment. Downstairs, the guests were taking their seats. The air was thick with the scent of the red lilies. The music started a string quartet, playing a haunting melody that sounded less like a wedding march and more like a requiem. Hollis stood at the altar. He looked pale. He kept touching the pocket where the note was hidden. He looked at the flowers, the red lilies his mother loved. The note said they were a signal. A signal of what? The doors at the back of the hall remained closed. The music swelled. Everyone stood up. Merrit began her walk. She held her head high, smiling her fake, practiced smile. She locked eyes with Hollis, willing him to look at her with love. But he wasn't looking at her. He was looking past her, at the massive oak doors behind her. And then, just as Merrit reached the halfway point, the music stopped. Not a fade out, but a hard cut. Silence slammed into the room. The heavy oak doors groaned. They didn't open for the bride. They were opening for someone else. A figure stepped into the light. It wasn't the frail, confused old woman Merrit had described. It was a queen returning to her throne. Meredith Peter stood in the doorway. The beige cardigan was gone. She wore a gown of midnight blue silk that shimmered like water. Around her neck, the Peter family emeralds blazed with a green fire that made Merritt's diamond ring look like a toy. Merrit froze in the middle of the aisle. Her smile faltered, then vanished. "What are you doing here?" Merrit hissed, the sound echoing in the silent hall. I told you it's better if you're not here." Meredith didn't shout. She didn't look angry. She looked at Merrit with the terrifying calm of a judge delivering a verdict. "You were right, Merrit," Meredith said, her voice projecting to the back of the room without a microphone. "It is better if the mother of the groom isn't here. But I am not here as a mother." She took a step forward, the emeralds catching the light. "I am here as the owner of this house, and I believe your lease has just expired." The silence in the room was so deep you could hear the candles flickering. A collective gasp swept through the pews as the guests Savannah's elite, Merritt's influencer friends, and Hollis's confused relatives stared at the woman standing at the back of the aisle. They remembered Meredith as the quiet lady who sat in the corner at parties, holding a cup of tea and wearing a sweater that had seen better days. They didn't know this woman. This woman stood 6 inches taller in her heels. She wore power like a perfume. Merrit was the first to break the silence. Her face turned a blotchy shade of red, clashing horribly with her white dress. She didn't see a matriarch. She saw a problem. She saw a stain on her perfect magazine cover. "Security!" Merrit screamed, her voice cracking. She pointed a shaking finger at Meredith. "Get her out! She's crashing my wedding! She's unhinged!" 2 large security guards in black suits stepped out from the shadows near the entrance. They were imposing men, hired to keep paparazzi out. Merrit smiled triumphantly. She waited for them to grab the old woman and drag her away. But the guards didn't grab Meredith. Instead, they turned to her, clasped their hands respectfully in front of them, and bowed their heads. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Peter," the lead guard said, his voice deep and respectful. "Welcome home." Merritt's mouth fell open. "What are you doing? I paid you. Do your job." Meredith began to walk down the aisle. She moved slowly, the silk of her gown rustling like a whisper. Every step was a statement. As she passed the pews, people shrank back, awed by the sheer force of her presence. "You paid them with a credit card that was declined at 9 a.m. this morning, Merrit," Meredith said calmly, her voice carrying effortlessly. "My company, however, has paid their salaries for the last 10 years. They know who signs the checks." She reached the altar and stopped. She didn't look at her son yet. She looked straight at Merrit. Up close, the contrast was brutal. Merrit looked like a child playing dress-up in a costume. Meredith looked like royalty. "You said I didn't fit the brand," Meredith said, tilting her head slightly. "You were right. My brand is honesty. My brand is legacy. And my brand does not tolerate thieves." "I am not a thief!" Merrit shrieked, looking at Hollis for support. "Hollis, do something! Your mother has lost her mind. She's ruining our day." Hollis looked paralyzed. He looked at his mother, really looked at her. For the first time in years, he saw the emeralds around her neck. He recognized them from an old painting in his grandfather's study. A painting he had forgotten about until this exact moment. "Mom," Hollis whispered. "I do," Meredith said softly, her eyes finally softening as she looked at her son. "I built the Peter Heritage Group from the ground up after your father died. I kept it quiet because I wanted you to build your own life, Hollis. I wanted you to be loved for who you are, not for my money. But it seems..." She turned her gaze back to Merrit, her eyes hardening into flint. "It seems I failed to protect you from those who only love money." "That's a lie!" Merrit shouted, grabbing Hollis's arm and digging her nails in. "She's lying, baby. She's jealous. She's a sad, lonely old woman who wants to control you." Meredith didn't argue. She simply raised her hand and snapped her fingers. To the right of the altar, a massive projection screen began to descend from the ceiling. It was meant to show a montage of Hollis and Merritt's love story photos of their vacations and dates. Orion, the lawyer, stepped out from behind a pillar. He plugged a tablet into the system. "Ladies and gentlemen," Orion announced, his voice dry and professional, "please direct your attention to the screen." The projector hummed to life. A photo appeared. It wasn't a romantic beach selfie. It was a grainy security camera image. It showed Merritt sitting at a blackjack table, holding a cocktail, laughing with a stack of chips in front of her. The timestamp was dated 3 weeks ago. "This is the Sapphire Casino in Atlantic City," Meredith narrated, her voice devoid of emotion. "Hollis, you transferred $40,000 to Merritt on the 12th. She told you it was for the caterer, the florist, and the venue deposit." The image on the screen changed. It was a bank statement. The text was large enough for everyone to read. Outgoing wire, $40,000. Recipient, Sapphire Casino Holdings. Current balance, negative $420. The crowd erupted. Whispers turned into shouts. She gambled it? "The wedding isn't paid for." Merritt went pale. She let go of Hollis's arm as if it burned her. "That's photoshopped. It's fake. She made it up." "Is it?" Meredith asked. "Then why did the florist deliver lilies from my garden instead of the roses you ordered?" "Because there was no money, Merritt. You stole from my son to feed your addiction." Hollis stepped back. He looked at the screen, then at the woman he was about to marry. The note in his pocket felt heavy against his chest. "Ask her where the money went." "You told me you paid them," Hollis said, his voice trembling. "You swore on your life you paid them." I was going to win it back," Merritt cried, tears streaming down her face, tears of panic, not regret. "I just had a bad run, Hollis. I was doing it for us. I wanted to double it so we could have a better honeymoon. Please, baby, don't listen to her." The screen changed again. This time, it wasn't a bank statement. It was a police report. Subject: Sarah Miller. Alias: Merritt Vance. Wanted for identity theft, check fraud. "Who is Sarah Miller?" Hollis asked, his voice barely a whisper. "She is," Meredith answered. "She stole the identity of a college roommate named Merritt Vance 4 years ago. The real Merritt Vance is a dental hygienist in Ohio who has been fighting to clear her credit score for years. The woman standing in front of you is a fraud, Hollis. She doesn't have wealthy parents. She has 3 warrants for her arrest." The room went dead silent. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was a crime scene. Merritt looked around wildly. Her mask had completely shattered. Her face twisted into a snarl. She realized the crying act wouldn't work. She dropped the bouquet of fake flowers she was holding. "So what?" Merritt spat, her voice venomous. "So I lied. Big deal. You think he cares? He loves me. And once we sign that paper, half of this dump is mine anyway." She lunged for the small table where the marriage license sat, trying to grab the pen. "Sign it, Hollis," she screamed. "Sign it and we can sue her. We can take everything." Hollis looked at the pen. Then he looked at his mother. Standing tall and dignified in her emeralds, the woman who had swept leaves for him, who had endured insults for him, who had given him a check for $5,000, even when she was treated like dirt. He looked at Merritt, desperate and greedy, eyes only on the contract. Hollis reached out and took the pen. Merritt's eyes lit up. "Yes. Yes, baby. Do it." Hollis held the pen up and snapped it in half. Ink splattered onto the white lace of Merritt's dress like black blood. "Get out," Hollis said. "What?" Merritt gasped. "Get out," Hollis shouted, the anger finally breaking through. "Don't you dare speak to my mother again. Don't you dare say her name. You wanted a rich husband? Well, the joke is on you." The money isn't mine. It's hers. And I'd rather be poor for the rest of my life than spend one more second with a liar like you." Merrit stared at him, stunned. Her golden ticket had just ripped itself up. "You're making a mistake!" she shrieked. "I am the best thing that ever happened to you." "I believe," Meredith interrupted, stepping forward, "that you are trespassing." Meredith nodded to the back of the room. The sound of sirens, which had been faint in the distance, suddenly grew loud. Blue and red lights flashed through the stained glass windows of the estate. Police officers marched through the doors. Orion handed them a thick manila envelope. "Miss Miller," the officer said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs, "we have a warrant for your arrest." Merrit tried to run. She actually hiked up her dress and tried to scramble toward the side exit, but the security guards, Meredith's loyal employees, blocked her path. They didn't touch her. They just stood there, like a wall of granite. The police grabbed her arms. As they dragged her back down the aisle, kicking and screaming, she passed Meredith. Meredith held up a hand. "Wait." The officers paused. Meredith leaned in close to Merrit. The screaming stopped. Merrit looked into the eyes of the woman she had mocked, the woman she had tried to erase. Meredith whispered, her voice low and cold as the grave. "You said on my son's wedding day, it was better if I wasn't there. But you forgot one thing, dear. A house is only as strong as its foundation, and I am the foundation." Merrit sobbed, her face crumbling in absolute horror. The officers dragged her out the heavy oak doors, her white dress trailing on the floor she had tried to steal. The doors slammed shut. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't tense. It was the silence of a storm that had finally passed. Hollis slumped against the altar, putting his head in his hands. Meredith walked over to him. She didn't hug him immediately. She stood in front of him, waiting for him to stand up. "I'm sorry," Hollis choked out, not looking up. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I was so weak. I let her treat you like garbage because I was afraid of being alone." "You were weak," Meredith agreed firmly. She wasn't going to sugarcoat it. "You let a stranger disrespect your blood. You let greed blind you." Hollis looked up, tears in his eyes. "I know. I don't deserve your help. I don't deserve anything." Meredith looked at her son. She saw the regret. She saw the pain. Slowly, she reached out and cupped his face with her hands. Hands that had worked and saved and built an empire. "You made a mistake, Hollis," she said gently. "But you are still a Peter, and we do not stay down. We learn. And we rebuild." She turned to the guests, who were still watching in shock. "The wedding is canceled," Meredith announced, her voice ringing out clear and strong. "However, the food has been paid for by me. The music is paid for, and the bar is open. I suggest you all stay and celebrate." "Celebrate what?" a guest asked tentatively. Meredith smiled, and for the first time, it was a genuine, warm smile. "Celebrate that my son got his life back. And celebrate the fact that the trash has been taken out." The room erupted in applause. It started slow, then grew louder. The waiters brought out the trays of champagne, the real champagne. The music started up again, upbeat and joyful. Hollis hugged his mother, burying his face in her shoulder. "I love you, Mom. I'll make it up to you. I'll pay you back every cent she stole." "You will," Meredith whispered, holding him tight. "You're going to start on Monday. The foundation needs a new director. And the first thing you're going to do is set up a legal aid fund for the elderly who have been victims of financial fraud. You're going to make sure no other grandmother has to go through this." Hollis nodded, wiping his eyes. "I will." Meredith looked out at the party. She touched the emerald necklace one last time. She didn't need the validation of high society. She didn't need a magazine cover. She had her son back. and she had her dignity. She walked toward the garden, needing a moment of quiet. As she stepped out into the humid Savannah air, she looked at the bed of red lilies. They were vibrant, strong, and deeply rooted in the earth, just like her. Merrit thought money was power, but Meredith knew the truth. Character is power. Do you think Hollis deserved a second chance, or should Meredith have let him figure it out on his own? Let us know in the comments. And if you believe in karma, hit that like button. Until next time.